universities. And if you're in the top third, then you're an R1. So that number changes every year a little bit. But last year, to be in the top third, to be an R1, you had to be in the top 131. Well, the University of Tennessee, Knoxville was 107th. So we're kind of on the bubble. The University of Tennessee Institute of Agriculture, separate by itself, is 170th. I was talking with one professor in agriculture just last week at lunch, and he was telling me that he had a really great international candidate looking to come to UTIA, and his government was going to pay his tuition, but they had a rule. We'll pay your tuition to any place in the United States that you want to go, as long as they're in the top 100. That's kind of arbitrary, and this professor felt the person that person was going to be studying was the world's best, but the country just said, well, you got to be at least in the top 100. So we're actually losing talent because some people just said, you know, if you're not even in the top 100, you know, we maybe not want to send you. But the thing that I found out early on last November too was that we were being treated unfairly. But the reason why, every other university in the country that's a land grant university had their Institute of Agriculture as a part of their flagship. Every single one. There's 42 other land grant universities. I think I got that number right, 42, and everyone had them as a single unit. By doing that, if we did that, we would go from 170th and 107th to 55th in the publics. So we get treated fairly, and reputation and rankings do matter when we're recruiting students, getting research and grants. So with that idea, so that was the idea. What would we have to do? And simply to do that, we had to change the reporting structure and title of Tenn to report also into Knoxville and to me, but also to, and by doing that, we were able to move up to 55th. So is this a good idea or not? So people have asked, well, what was the process? So first off, I went to all the Board of Trustees, and this is starting, actually maybe back up, no, and earlier than that, we went to make sure that we were had our facts right. We went to the National Center for Higher Education Management Systems, a mouthful, NCHMS, and they did a study for us and reviewed all the universities across the country and all the titles of all the folks that are in charge of agriculture, and came back and basically confirmed exactly what we said. This report, by the way, is on the website, so you can go and look, and I think there's information on the website on your chair. They came back and said, yes, this is exactly right, and you are separate from and different from structure than everybody else. So we went to talk to all of our board members. January, February, we talked to every single one of our board members. They also felt like this was the right thing to do. We started talking to our government officials. I talked to Governor Lee. I talked to Mike Krause, the director of the Tennessee Higher Education Commission, and several others. Those a few of the key also to get their support. Then we started talking to chancellors. So we talked to some former chancellors like Jimmy Cheek. We talked to former presidents like Joe Johnson. Obviously, we talked to Tim Cross, and then we talked to all the other chancellors across the state. Our incoming candidates, we had 4 candidates applying for the Knoxville job. Each one of them were briefed on some of the things we would do. Each one of them said felt like this was the right thing. One of them, actually in his town hall meeting, we also talked about Oak Ridge Institute, kind of actually almost stole the thunder and said, you know, I think if we could do a couple of major things in restructuring the university, we could be an AAU school. I said, stop! But he's right that we could go from a school that's on the bubble to one that could be a top contender, an AAU school. We talked to a lot of the external stakeholders. We talked to the Farm Bureau. We went out and talked to like Jim Herbert that I named our school. I'm probably leaving out a lot of folks, but there was a lot of conversations over a long period of time. Finally, in June, we had our board meeting. We announced a week beforehand that we were going to be changing the reporting structure, and we had 4 different town hall conference calls with over 100 people. We had 2 for our faculty. We had 2 for Farm Bureau and people that they wanted to invite on the call. So we had an extensive amount of conversations. And then in the end, we had the meeting with the board. So I share all that just to say, this is the logic that we had. We had a very extensive process, from other organizations I've been in, from state government to business. It felt like we were pretty exhaustive in the amount of thoroughness that we did around changing one title about one of our leaders, which is something that the CEO of the organization is charged with to do. So I want to give you that background. People ask, well, what was the process? And so, and why did you do it? So that's the why and the process. Going forward, the question is, I heard a question, well, is everything already predetermined on what the next steps are? They're not. The idea was, and I put this in a memo, as you guys may have seen it, I apologize for the bad math, but it said, well, we want this to be more than 1 + 1 = 2. The 1 + 1 = 2 math is, if you add 107 to 170th, we go to 55th, and that's done. And if we don't do anything else, well, that's good. Being 55th is better than being 170th, so that's a good thing. But if we just did that, we would miss so many opportunities. Back to the 1 + 1 = 3. And there's so many opportunities for us to work closer together, to find new synergies, to do new things. And in the last couple of months, I've heard so many great ideas, but we want to be very thorough and very strategic about what ideas we take. So we've got a listening committee. Many of them are in the room. They're going to go around the state, convening different groups of people, so we make sure we capture everyone's ideas. And they're going to be sharing with us ideas that they see for improvement. Tim and Dondi will be, maybe a little bit with me if they ask, but they'll be looking over these ideas and deciding some priorities. Because obviously we can't do it. I'm confident we'll end up with more things than we can possibly afford to do and have time to do. So we want to make sure that we're smart about it and do the things that are going to make the biggest difference and contribute the most. So there's going to be a process. We're going to continue to collect some good ideas, and I want to share one because it came up just this week as an example of some of the things that I think might be possible. So I was in Carter County on Tuesday morning and met with Vicki, who's the director there. And they've got a great, by the way, anybody been to Carter County Extension? A few of us. You should go, just go visit. They're in an 1861 house called the Folsom House. I think it's the oldest office, it's probably the oldest office, definitely an extension, one of the oldest ones in UT, but just great. But anyway, through the conversation, Vicki was telling me of the many things that you know that Extension does. They do divorce counseling. Sad, but in the state of Tennessee, we're in the top 10 in the divorce rate in the state, in the country. And Extension teaches a co-parenting class. So if you get a divorce in the state of Tennessee and you want federal benefits, you've got to go take this co-parenting class. Sad that it's necessary, but it is. And most people don't know that Extension does it, but they're doing a fantastic job with it. So she was talking about how terrible the divorce rate is in Carter County. In Carter County, they have this not unique phenomenon of grandparents raising grandchildren because the parents are all in jail or addicted to something, which is really, really tragic. But it occurred to me, maybe a quick backstory. There's an organization in Chattanooga called First Things First. I got to know them during the campaign. They've been around for 20 years, and they're focused on finding youth and communities that are at risk and giving them coaching on how to create a better family and an intact family. So what they do is they talk to young men about what it means to be a good father, what it means to be a good husband at an early age. Then when young couples decide to get married, they also do counseling. They say they talk 30% of them out of getting married, because a lot of times they haven't really thought about it. Like, well, how many kids are you going to have? I don't know. We never talked about it. When we start talking about some of these real life things, they decide, well, maybe we won't. And then once they get married, they have counseling. It's a great program, and they've actually reduced the divorce rate in Chattanooga by 40%. And there's a lot of theories around, if you want to improve third grade reading level, reduce adverse childhood effects, being able to have a strong family in place makes a difference. There's a lady named Christy Gordon at the Department of Psychology here in Knoxville who's actually adopted that program in Chattanooga and is going to pioneer it here in Knoxville. I'm thinking, while Vicki's talking about this, wouldn't it be great if we put Christy Gordon together with Vicki and create a program where we can start enhancing our programs around preventing divorce rates across the state? That's just an example that just came up this week, but we hear dozens of them on a regular basis. There's so many opportunities for the intellectual capital on this campus to be able to be leveraged across the state. And somebody asked me this also by email this morning, where's the money going to come from to do all this stuff? If we get a compelling idea, it's up to us to go to our legislators, to our grant people that donate to us to go raise the funds. But there's a lot of really compelling ideas I think that we're going to be really, really successful with. Thinking of maybe one other question that I've heard, and this was just earlier this week, and then I'll stop. And that is, are we going to move all of you guys to Martin? So I'm not sure where that came from. There was actually a guy named Frank Cagle. He's a local writer. Paper cut him. Well, I shouldn't say it that way. He's no longer with the paper, the Knoxville News Sentinel, so he decided to do a blog. Nobody reads the blog. It's like 160 people reads the blog. He wrote an article during the board vote that said it had all kinds of stuff in it, but one of which, well, and it could be that they're going to move everything in Knoxville to UT Martin. Tim and I went to see Keith Carver a couple of weeks ago, and we surprised him with the rumor. He wasn't aware of it, but it seems to be circulating around. At first, we just decided to ignore it, but it came up multiple times. So I just want to let you hear from me. Neither Tim nor I nor Keith Carver had any clue that was being even discussed. But it's not. It obviously doesn't make any sense. But there's some crazy things out there, and I guess that's one of the things that we're working hard to do is to make sure that we're communicating with as many people as possible to squelch any crazy rumors and most importantly, to capture more good ideas. And so with that, I'm going to stop and maybe a lot of you guys haven't met Dondi, maybe give her a moment to say a word or two, and then Tim a moment to say a word or two. Then we'll turn it over to you for questions.
Hey, thank you very much, and thank you, President Boyd. So some of you know that I was here on the faculty for a brief period between 2007 and 2010. I was a professor in the business college and a department head. And I got a great opportunity to go be a dean of a college of business at a major land-grant university in Nebraska. And the day I walked in the door, I began learning about what a land-grant university is. The three parts of the mission, research that people can understand and it makes a difference in their life, teaching, and engagement are a mission I completely buy into, and I wouldn't want to be anywhere else than a land-grant university. I realized I had been at a land-grant. I was here. But I'll be honest with you, when I was here, I didn't hear very much conversation about we're a land-grant. And I think part of that was the structural arrangement, maybe in a way that, well, that's y'all's responsibility. Actually, your mission, it's our whole campus's mission. And so when I began to think about becoming a chancellor or a president, I only wanted to go to a land-grant school because I believe strongly in the mission. I've been all over the state since I've been here, 3 big events around in the state where I talk about the way I think about a land-grant is, the reason I want to be here, is the 2 pieces of the mission that mean the most to me are A, land grants have always been about access. And I'm proud of that. And I don't ever want to be at a place where your daddy's money got you in here or your mom's money got you, not to be sexist, your mom's money got you in here. I want to be at a place where access is a priority. And that's what a land grant is. And the second thing is a land grant is all about research that changes people's lives. I saw in Nebraska at the experiment stations, farmers coming down there and with their problem. And I saw the scientists that were trying to develop a new bean and saying, this could solve the problem of poverty. And the farmers going, well, I don't think I could sell it. Is there a market for it? And that exchange that was going on right there, and that's huge. That's what we do. And so I totally get that, understand it, embrace it. And I would say, honestly, if you think of the great public universities in this country, they are all land grants, mostly. And a land grant is only as good as the Ag College, the Ag Institute, however it's organized. That's the truth. And the University of Tennessee, to aspire to the things that we want is you know, we're all part of this together. And so I wanted you to know that. A second thing that when I think about this, in my experience at Nebraska, and I'm not saying we should try to go be like them in any ways, because we're so much stronger in a lot of ways, but the Ag Institute was kind of a centerpiece around which so much thrived. There were departments in arts and sciences, there were departments in engineering, where part of the faculty were in arts and sciences and part of them were in the Ag Institute. Same with engineering. There were faculty who chose part of their appointment in the Ag Institute, part of their appointment in other colleges. So I I see the potential for the collaboration that could happen, and I'm very eager to loosen up whatever our procedural arrangements are to make some of those kind of things happen. And so I'm very excited about what could be with this. Tim invited me to come with him to the Farm Bureau. And one of the first questions they asked was, well, so Dr. Cross is our leader. And now it looks like there's 3 leaders. And that worries us. And I said back to them, first of all, I refer to him as Tim Cross, and they go, we call him Dr. Cross. I said, okay. Dr. Cross is the leader of the Institute. He is the leader. My job as chancellor is to help get the resources that this institute needs to go to the next place and to achieve, and I'm committed to doing that. I would also say that Dr. Cross's cabinet and mine have already had one meeting where we began talking about what this means and where we think it can go. That went really great. Clearly, we got a million details to work out. But I hope that you will do the same thing that I asked of the cabinet when I came here eight weeks ago. Whatever's happened in the past, there's not anything I can do about it. But what I want you to do is help me and Dr. Cross, I'm going to keep calling you that, Tim, move this forward in great, exciting ways that I know can happen. And I could not be more excited about it. We have to be strong in this area. The university will only be as strong as the Institute for Ag is. It's important to this state. It's important to me and to President Boyd. And so I'm here to help move that along.
Good. I'll be real brief because most of you know me and I know most of you. And I think I've already heard from many of you in person, but I hope if you've got things you haven't shared yet, let me know. This is your chance also to let all of us know what your thoughts or concerns are. Let me just say, I've always thought the universe should revolve around the Institute of Agriculture, and I appreciate Dr. Plowman pointing that out. And I appreciate Randy supporting that vision. So, we'll see if we can't take that even further. I do think, as I've talked to groups, the math, the change in rankings, that's all well and good. And actually, most people say, oh, I see that. That makes sense. But really, that's a one-time thing, right? One-time benefit, and then we just sort of carry on from there. What I've tried to point out is, well, this collaboration, this restructure is only of value if both our organizations, if our combined organization continues to grow. In other words, if this is being done in any way to diminish or decrease the Institute of Agriculture, it defeats the purpose because the rankings will obviously then go down. So I think it's important to think through what are the long-term implications here and what are the incentives to do things good or bad. And to me, I see a lot of positives in increased collaboration. The challenges that we face today, Randy mentioned opioids, think about hunger, poverty, the environment, conservation. None of those are departments that any of us has. And yet we have scientists and faculty and extension specialists that have expertise that can come together to address those things. So really that, to me, is the most important long-term benefit that we need to be pointed towards to make sure we're really at the table and addressing those issues and collaborating with the computer scientists, the electrical engineers, the supply chain logistics experts that we really need to help support agriculture, which is still the biggest industry in the state. So my perspective on it, my 2 cents worth, but what we really are here for, I think, is to hear from you. So welcome you to ask questions. Tiffany, is it best if folks come forward, or do we want to pass the microphone? Keep this one up here.
Tiffany, maybe you could give us some instructions.
So we will take questions in the audience first, so line up at the microphone. If you are on the computer or on the phone, on the computer, raise your hand. On the phone, hit *9. We'll take in person first, and then we'll move to the computer and the phone.
Oh, so this question is directed to you, Randy. So I learned today that you had a lot of planning meetings regarding this proposal. You met with administration, you met with board members, you met with key stakeholders, the government, Nashville people, former presidents, stakeholders, Farm Bureau, and you found this to be a fairly exhaustive study of the system. So my question is to you, you have these meetings, so I'm going to make a conclusion that these meetings were secretive meetings.
Oh, they weren't.
Well,
they're private meetings, but not, I wouldn't call them secretive, but they're private meetings.
they're secretive to me and the faculty. You can say they're not secretive, but the faculty think they're secretive. That's mostly the reason why we're sitting, all of us are in this room. Okay. So why did you think it was necessary to keep this proposal secretive from your own faculty?
So what a purpose to keep it secretive? I want to make sure that I talk to all the experts that I needed to get advice from on an organizational change at the top level. And to maybe further add, so I think I understand your question,
insulting
that when you're trying to decide the reporting structure and title of one of your executives, it's not something that you go to everybody across the state to talk about. It's something I need to talk to the people that are in the administration, in particular my board of trustees, to make sure that they agreed with the decision that I would make, that I'm entitled, that I'm empowered to make.
that you're empowered to make.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do you believe in shared governance?
I do.
Do you think you followed shared governance in this procedure?
Yes.
I disagree.
Okay. I think, well, it's a whole nother conversation. Maybe I can let some others add on.
It's not. This,
No,
the problem that you're having here, and the reason you're here, is because this was jammed through at the last minute. You can say it's not, but everybody in this room and everybody watching knows what I'm saying, and they hear it. And when you say it's not true, you're stripping yourself of your own clothes.
Well,
so please.
There will be something, I guess we may have a longer conversation about shared governance. Shared governance doesn't mean that we share every single decision. There are a lot of things that you're going to make decisions on that I'm not involved in. There are decisions that I'm going to be involved in that you're not involved in. This is one that belongs to the CEO of the organization.
If you'll, when you get off duty here, if you'll go read some documents on shared governance, I've got one I could read. Let me speak for 30 seconds and then I will shut down. I won't say another thing the rest of the day here. Okay, so I'm going to read the Association of Governing Boards of Universities and Colleges. This is their definition of shared governance. I'm not an expert on this. I just looked this up yesterday. Shared governance is the process by which various constituents, traditionally governing boards, senior administration, and faculty, possibly also staff, students, and others, contribute to decision-making related to college or university policy and procedure. When done well, shared governance strengthens the quality of leadership and decision-making at an institution, enhances its ability to achieve its vision and to meet strategic goals, and increases the odds that when the very best thinking by all parties to shared governance is brought to bear on institutional challenges. When done well, shared governance engenders an institutional culture of collective ownership and accountability for the institution's present and future. Further, when faculty, administrators, and boards are actively and collaboratively involved in decision-making processes, decisions are implemented more quickly and more effectively. But strong governance also takes effort to cultivate and maintain. It's a tradition unique to higher education sector, but even senior administrators and faculty, let alone board members, tend to not be academics, usually lack formal training on the subject. Knowing how shared governance works, how it should be, and how it should work differently is not secured in the nature of the parties involved in it. One last thing. The other reason we're here is because when Tim's former boss Joe got promoted to chancellor, that was also not really a shared governance action either. So now we're reducing. So anyway.
Thank you for, I think everyone has a right to look at the process and come up with your own view about it. Where we are today, and this is my plea to everyone, where we are today is let's figure out how to go forward. And Tim and I want to pull our groups together. We're eager to get, I'd like you to hear me out because I heard you out, to get our groups together to try to figure out what are the things we want to put in place and how are we going to make this work. So I think just focusing on kind of like all the things that we wish had been done, that it's legitimate to have those thoughts and ideas, but it doesn't help us right now when we need to try to figure out how to move forward. So,
well, the past is the precursor to the future. And what last week the faculty were invited here, and we were instructed these are the things we can talk about, these are the things we can't talk about. And our sole activity was to write our ideas on a Post-it note. They went on a board. These go to a committee appointed by, I assume it was you, Randy.
It was a collective.
Okay, so upper
We all
administration,
suggested names.
not the faculty senate. And these ideas, they don't write they write a recommendation of ideas, not a draft proposal. Then they go to y'all. Y'all write a rule or a proposal to the board that doesn't come back to the faculty. We don't get to see it before the board necessarily. Don't get to make, so the whole thing is being jammed.
Yeah. That's not the correct description of the process.
Okay, well, that's what I understood from the meeting last week. The primary thing that it keeps being done, we need to do this so we get rankings higher. That's already been accomplished. So I see no big hurry for the rest of this to go through. The main thing everybody keeps saying is the rankings, and I don't think anybody really has an issue with that. The only person I see maybe would be Tim that would have any beef with it. So, but that's done.
Can I ask you
So this rush to push everything through by November 8th is really kind of, seems to me like an artificial construct, and we have not heard what your ideas are and what your plans are for this. You haven't shared those with us.
I just did.
No, you haven't said.
I'll do it now if you'll give me the mic.
I'd like you to write down what your ideas are specifically. Like, you haven't.
I have it, and I just.
Okay.
Thank you. So as I shared, the only thing that we've accomplished is that one ranking adjustment. Everything else is up to the people in this room and the broader group or stakeholders that we have. Now what's next is to come up with other ideas. And I don't want you to get too caught up on the board date. There's not a rush to do anything on that particular date. All we're expected to do at the board is to share with them what good ideas we've come up with so far. However, there could be some good ideas that come up now that we decide to do now. For example, and these will be very small and not terribly exciting, but it depends on your point of view. Maybe we come up with a direct bus route that everybody appreciates. But there could be some small wins that we could come up with along the way. And everything else, we're going to continue to look for new ideas for, I guess, years into the future. Things that involve faculty, that are decisions of faculty, they'll be a key part of those conversations. Deciding the bus route, that'll probably be somebody different. So there'll be certain decisions that'll be made by the people that are responsible for them. But my plan is, as we've said, to let all of you and others contribute good ideas for us to review and then decide which ones we move forward with. No.
I'll tell you, I
just
heard an example. Here's an example I just heard this morning. I was at breakfast with faculty, and one of your faculty was there, and he said, Dondi, do you know that the campus tours don't bring students over here, prospective students? When I get done here, I'm going back to the office and call and find out if that's true, and we're going to change that. So just small things like that. But why don't you take the mic?
Hi, thank you very much for coming here. My name is Jay Weiland. I'm the Department Head of Nutrition and the Department Head of Public Health. I have a joint appointment with AG. Before coming here, I was at one of those land-grant universities at Cornell University, where there are advantages for it. I've been waiting since 1991 for this to happen, to be quite frank. I do all my research with folks associated with the Ag campus, and we've developed very successful research programs because of it. And I think this lowers some of the barriers that existed between the main campus and the Ag campus. And I also think there's a great advantage for those on the Ag campus because of the lack of resources that were not available to those on the Ag campus because it was a distinct and separate financial institution. So I applaud you for this change.
I'll leave you off the hot seat for a minute. I wanted to ask you what you see as the role of this unification plan on our Herbert College.
Say that again. What's the role in what?
What's the result for the Herbert College? Because we've always felt, like we don't get our fair share of the resources.
Well, we don't want you feeling that way. Okay. So what I'm eager to get to the place where Tim and I, as the two leaders of in this operational leaders, if you will, can get our teams together, take the input from these listening sessions, and start mapping out operationally what do we need to do. I've heard some things. I heard you guys could use some more graduate assistants. I've heard that there's okay. I've heard that there's a couple of faculty lines would go a long way. I've heard a number of things. I want to get past all this conversation to where Tim and I can start mapping it out. I heard you need a parking garage. That's not a promise to it, but I know there's a lot of things we got to start getting to work on. And I'm eager to get to a list of priorities and say, okay, what do we need to begin on first? I want to change the tours of the campus tomorrow.
Thank you.
Kim, let me just follow up on that. And, you know, there's a tendency to think, well, things were bad in the past, so this was done to address something bad. I don't think there was anything bad necessarily. We had great working relationship with Jimmy Cheek and with other chancellors. The mindset, though, was really as it should be, and that is, I'm a chancellor, I have my group of people that I support, and you have a chancellor and you have a group of people you support, and we're all each required to you know, take care of our own, if you will. The attitude and the approach that Dondi has just expressed, I think it gives us the ability to really move forward. And that is, again, I know there's probably a tendency for the folks on the Knoxville campus feel like, well, those ag people, they're just wanting to grab our resources as a result of this. And there's a bit of a tendency for us to think, well, we're just going to get what we're entitled to. I don't think that's the point. The point is we can work together because we're really advancing the same university, the same campus, the same students, and there's more of a mindset to advancing together as opposed to you do your thing, we'll do ours, and hopefully together we'll almost by coincidence improve. I think there's much more of a mindset towards intentional cooperation and collaboration. So,
Thank you both.
And I would just merely like to point out that Dr. Plowman is visiting with me tomorrow. She's coming to our campus and to my office to discuss in more detail and get to know us better. And so we welcome you and we look forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Morning, Andrea.
Morning, Andrea.
Thank you guys for being here. Andrea Ludwig, Biosystems Engineering and Soil Science. I'm currently serving on the Faculty Senate as the Ag Caucus Chair. I would like to, I guess, respectfully disagree a little bit with the idea that we shouldn't be looking backwards into what has happened and just looking forward. I think we can all agree that there's a lot of value that it sounds like we need as a faculty to regain some trust. And to do that, we need to look backwards and identify what were the failures in the system here that led us to a point where we've got a lot of folks that are unhappy with the process and where we are right now. And here we are all collected here instead of in our offices doing the good work for the people of Tennessee, right? So I think there's a lot of value, and this is an opportunity to look back to see what was missing and how can we identify those pieces that we're missing and ask, or how can we get them into the process moving forward. So just as an example, earlier this week at a brainstorming session, a room full of UT employees, we were asking them on the front end to either agree or disagree with a statement, and that statement was, the process caused me to mistrust unification. Over 80% of the people there responded that they agreed. So what is going to be done to gain trust? Beyond listening sessions.
So I appreciate what you're saying. Yes, we have to learn from the past to do better in the future. And I think the way I've been thinking about trust, I've heard the comment about trust on the campus on that side of the bridge. Unrelated to this is there's been all sorts of examples of people feeling trust has been broken in the past. And so part of what we have to do, only way I know to do it, is one-on-one conversations, sitting down with people and say, what happened? How did we get to this point? And what do we do next? And that's what I'm focusing on, at least, just as Carla pointed out with the deans. And then just getting around the table, rolling up our sleeves, and getting to work at being who we want to be. Now, I know that sounds kind of vague, but I'm committed to exactly that. I'm also open to feedback. If you have specific things you could say to me and Tim, like, okay, next time when you guys get ready to do X, here's what we would like to see happen. The one thing I want to say to faculty is, you know, I've come to this route through that path. I was a faculty member. I totally appreciate shared governance. What what I need you all to do right now, especially, is to help us with the two pieces that are you own on any campus is the curriculum. We need exciting, inspiring curriculum that is going to attract more and more students here. We need to attract faculty and postdocs and graduate students, and we need to find ways to do that, processes to do that we all feel good about. So while some of the administrative decisions that have been made, we don't necessarily like the way they were made, okay, let's try to learn from that. And as Tim and I go forward in trying to put this together, help us figure out what to do. That's what I would say.
And I'll just say, well, I forgot this. I'll just say simply that I apologize if anybody felt that their trust was broken in me. It's something that I pride myself on. If you want to hurt my feelings, it's probably the most damaging way to do that. If you look at my experience with any other organization I've had, we've always had an incredibly high level of trust, and it comes with lots of communication. And maybe we deride the comment about listening, but I really do think communication and listening is the heart of trust, because to have trust, you have to have understanding. To have understanding, you have to listen. So I would suggest that listening is actually really, really important. And for me, it's just spending more time out listening. And I think there's going to be a lot of individual sessions as well with smaller groups in this room and then all across the state. You know, part of the reason why I'm going to all the extension offices, I've been to, I think, 38 or 39 now, is just to be able to make sure that they can ask me questions directly and I can and talk to them directly. At the end of the day, you can trust somebody and disagree with them. I'm okay with people disagreeing with me. I don't want them to not trust me. You can disagree that maybe faculty should be in charge of deciding reporting lines of officers. But at least I want you to trust how I came to it. It wasn't a matter of being secretive, being untrustworthy. It was a difference of opinion. But we'll continue to communicate, and we'll work hard to learn from this experience and try to do better in the future.
Two quick thoughts. One, Dr. Doug Steele, I worked with for years. He was extension director at Texas A&M. And if you know Doug, he's about 6'9", 270 pounds, looks just like me. Doug had a statement that I use frequently, and I've told him I've stole it from him. He's aware, honor the past, but look to the future. And I think we need to do that. We have a rich tradition on the Institute of Ag campus, on the rest of campus, UT system as a whole, a lot of great traditions, a strong past. So I don't think we could just pretend nothing happened. But I think we do need to make sure we are looking to the future, make sure we're doing what our stakeholders need, what they tell us is important, what their priorities are, whether they're students, whether they're farmers, whether they're divorcing parents. We need to be attentive to those needs first and foremost, because that's why we're here. That's what we're paid to do. And then the second thing is trust is earned, not demanded. So I'd love to give you a list of 7 things we're going to do to earn your trust. I think it'd be better if we figured out together how we could maybe strengthen trust among faculty, among administrators. There's too much of a tendency that it's us against you, if you will. I'm saying us as in all 3 of us. Really and truly, again, we're all here for the same reason. We're supposed to support you. You're supposed to support stakeholders. We ought to be working together, and I welcome ideas on the trust side of things, because if I had a list, I'd share it with you, but it'd be a whole lot better list if we developed it together.
Thank you, guys. I'm looking forward to the next year on Faculty Senate, so thank you.
So I've had the privilege to be a dean in an organization that really is responsible, centered management. There's only X amount of resources that come to the college, and I'm responsible for allocating all those resources. And there isn't any additional money outside of tuition, state appropriations, research grants and contracts, gifts, and hospital revenue. And setting priorities for the college is always a challenge. There are always too many priorities to be able to handle associated with the amount of resources that come in. I know the university is looking at responsibility-centered management, You know, I'm a little bit fearful that there'll be winners and losers associated with that and how you allocate money. I'm very proud to be associated with the Institute of Agriculture because we serve the people. As you said, Dondi, you know, outreach to Tennessee is really our biggest responsibility. We got lots of youth. We have lots of problems. We have lots of priorities to set. And, you know, I pull my leadership team around to talk about priorities and talk about decisions. But ultimately, they fall on my shoulders to say, okay, I can't do that, but I'm going to do this. And, you know, there's good interactions of the people, and they understand, but still, you know, there are priorities. So you've got lots of priorities associated with running the university. Dr. Cross has lots of priorities in our mission of serving the people of Tennessee, of which you want to step into that role and to appreciate that. Randy, you know, as the system leader, are trying to be in position to advance all of the system and interacting with the people. I'd like to hear some comments of how you're going to establish priorities, how you're going to make sure that we're hitting the mission, and who's the ultimate decider of what gets done, when and where.
Such an easy question. I'm sure Dr. Plowman would be glad to answer that. Maybe the president.
Yeah. Well, so maybe you guys can fill in some more granular details, but here's a thought that I'd like to share with you and get your input on, and hopefully your collaboration on. This opioid summit, and I don't know if there was anybody in this room that were part of the opioid summit, but that was inspirational to me. So we started in January realizing that we had resources all across the state in the University of Tennessee addressing this, that none of them were talking to each other. So we had a summit in January, just bringing some UT resources together to focus on this. We quickly realized we can't do this by ourselves. There are other people all across the state we need to bring in. So we organized another summit, August 1st and 2nd. We're hopeful maybe 200 people will show up. Within the first 30 days, we had over 300 people that had signed up. Within 30 days before we had the summit, we had 500 people that had signed up. At the summit, there were over 700 people that all came together. And I guess seeing what we could do on that one grand challenge for our state was inspirational. The things that only the University of Tennessee could do, being able to convene people from all across the state. But what occurred to me is that I think our university collectively is unique, is the unique enterprise in the state that can actually transform our state in great ways. So I don't think anybody else has the things that we have. We're nonpartisan. We have reach in every single county. So physically, we are everywhere in our state. We have the financial, the physical, and the intellectual capital that no other enterprise in the state has. And we also have the ability to convene people because we're a trusted advisor. People from all across the state will come to work things that we bring together. And lastly, we have sustainability. If you're a governor, you're out in 8 years. If you're, most other positions, they're out. But a University of Tennessee, we've been here for 225 years. We'll probably be here for the next century. So we have sustainability. So given that, the thought is, what if we collectively, throughout our system, decided together on what the grand challenges of our state are, what things that we could all work together to do to totally transform our state in a positive way. And I'd like to have some conversations about what those are. You know, it could be completing the drive to 55. I know Dr. Shen has a great concept around this, or vision on One Health. Maybe that is something that could impact lives in every corner of the state. And uniquely, we are probably the best position to solve. So back to priorities. We're going to all have our departmental priorities. We got to fill this position. We've got to finish this research paper. There's all those things. But more broadly, wouldn't it be great if as an enterprise, we could come up and identify with some grand challenges? And so when people talk about the University of Tennessee, you can tell them, and they'll recognize us as, oh, you guys are the ones that are solving the opioid crisis. Or you guys are the ones that's making sure that we have a healthy population. I think there's the granular things, but there's also the opportunity for us to be a transformative force. And last, I'll just add this. I mentioned this to a group of folks a couple of days ago. What I would like for us to have a conversation around is what needs to be true to make the next decade the best decade in the history of the University of Tennessee. So we've been around for 225 years. How will people think back on us 20, 30 years from now of this next decade, from 2020 to 2030? What things need to be true to make this the absolute best decade? Let's define those things and then work together on those. And I think if we have those as our top objectives, all the other things will tie into those. That's my thought.
So Jim, you make an excellent point, which is that the hardest part of being a leader is saying yes to some things and no to other things. That's your point. As a dean, you do that every day. You set priorities. So here's how my response to that question is, as the new chancellor, I'm trying to spend this fall listening, learning, one-on-one conversations, small group conversations. What is it people want, need, long for, have missed, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's going to lead to an opportunity to create a new vision for this flagship campus starting in the spring. And that vision then should drive those priority decisions. As far as I'm concerned, when I think about it, it's got to build off of what makes us unique, what is uniquely Tennessee, Knoxville. And so once we get that, and that will be a big, broad, comprehensive, university-wide, people from sitting in this room and people in other rooms around campus to figure out what are our priorities. Because I don't think it's a hard thing to say. Like right now, would you say, if you asked Jeremy Pruitt what is his priority, we know what he would say. And it's different than what maybe I would say today. But we got to get a common sense of, this is what we've all kind of come to agreement on, and then those priorities drive how you set priorities in your college and how you set priorities in your college. And your priorities should influence the design of this thing in the spring. So I don't think we have yet the answer to that. We need to get it. And I've been saying I don't think just having a list of metrics that we want to achieve is particularly inspiring. I think we can get to those metrics by creating an inspiring vision. What is it that makes us really different? And what do we want the answer to that to be? Then we'll be able to make better those decisions. The new budget allocation model, however we get that designed, the biggest thing it's going to offer is a transparency about how financial decisions get made. We don't have. Well, you're right. And so part of what's going to happen between now and getting that developed is more transparency about what we have now. I told other people we got to start with the chancellor needs to understand it. And there's been just part of the culture here is that information's been held very tight. And so point well made.
That microphone's someplace else. So within our veterinary hospital, we have some services that make money, and we have other services that don't make money. So wildlife is like an indigent population. They don't really, walk in the door with a lot of money, but yet we try to take care of them. Put little casts on their broken squirrels' legs, and then let them back out to the wild, and a falcon eats them. It's all part of running an organization that students want to come to, all right? And so a priority that I see for our campus is research and doing biomedical research and having infrastructure on campus to be able to support laboratory animals and to be able to have high quality research areas that we can attract people to in order to do biomedical research. And the veterinary school is the only component of UT that has a medicine component to it. And so when I go out to try to hire scientists, I can't really handle the research needs that they have. And so the university has got to have one of those centralized vivariums or centralized laboratory animal facilities in order to attract new people to be able to do new things with engineering and do new things with nutrition and do new things with infectious diseases and surgeries and all kinds of things, all right? That will come at a price of resources, in order to invest in it and in order to grow that and to transform the university. And so, you know, as the leader, you know, that priority is going to be there at some point in time. But our land grant mission to serve Tennessee, you know, doesn't bring in lots of new revenue. You know, our Institute of Agriculture has lagged behind the campus in being able to grow our resources because we're non-formula funded, okay? And that has been a negative for our campus. And so in order for us to do our job, which is a critical job, we've got to be in position to attract more resources in some manner. And the university has to be in position to establish its priorities to try to grow each of the components of our teaching, research, and service missions. And I just know that it's hard, all right? And I think it's what the people that are sitting around the room here are saying. They would like to have a voice. So as you're sitting around the table and we're really discussing these things, that it's taken into deep consideration. Yeah, and so I think that's really all I wanted to make. The point is that the people want to be part of the decision making, and they need to be part of it. And then you got to be strong enough to take the bullets, okay, that come along with final decisions.
It was in the job description.
Mark.
Good morning. My name is Mark Fly, and I have a question about the redesigning the budget model. If you could explain more detail about what that is about, and also have a concern that we only have one member from the Institute of Agriculture on that committee, which is 6%, and it seems like it should be equal to the budget percent that we make up of the university. Thank you.
I don't know. Okay, so you're catching me on, I know some detail about a part of it. I don't know how much your budget is involved in that. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, a little bit. So I think Dr. Sheehan is a participant in that project, or that committee. Had their first meeting earlier this week, as I recall, Monday night. And actually, in terms of budget flow of dollars directly, only the Herbert College of Agriculture receives funds through the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. All the rest of our funds are separate and direct to the Institute, direct as in they're allocated to the University of Tennessee, and then line item appropriated to each of our units. We, of course, have USDA funding that comes direct as well as competitive funds. But I think the point is, Mark, it's really a very small component of funding. It's critically important to the Herbert College of Agriculture because it is virtually their sole source of funding other than fees and gifts. But that tuition funding flows directly.
So in some ways, the Institute is minimally affected. High impact college, however. So what the new budget model should achieve is there should be incentives in the way we allocate resources, which there are not now, for CALA to grow that college. And new revenues should flow as a result of growth. That does not now happen because we have an historical model, which basically you get a little bit more each year, and it's usually that whatever the salary increase was, the state passed, and if there were any additional resources, then the dean has to go begging. Kind of, I'm overstating it, but in the new, if we get it designed correctly, and I'm really happy that you're on there, it's going to help. Everybody will know exactly how it gets done. And now the way it is, and with the historical model, what happens is deans go in and they make their case, and they might get some more and they might not. Under this model, it'll be units will be rewarded for achieving the goals that are the institution's goals. So if the goals are growth of enrollments, if the goals are more research expenditures or higher impact journal publications, and a unit is hitting those, more research dollars will flow. Now, we also know that there are many units, and that's where I thought you were going, Jim, like when you talked about some parts of your college are never going to be revenue generators. So for example, teaching piano is always going to cost way more than it can ever bring in. And the reason we've got really smart people on this committee is to design a model that acknowledges that. So there will always be some programs that will be kind of subsidized. I hate to use that word, but proudly, you know. And so this is going to be a process that's going to take a while. It's not going to happen overnight. But a year from now or 6 months from now, 6 months from now, you should know what is the idea they're throwing around. Like, we want to value research dollars, we want to value impact journals, we want to value credit hours, or is it majors? Those are the things they're going to sort out. So thank you, Tim, for clarifying as it relates to you all. In many ways, I think your institute probably kind of operates more like that anyway. Your college is important for your college.
Okay, we have 5 questions from online. The first one is from Becky Campbell in Sullivan County Extension. Are there any plans or views on how this will impact the organizational structure for 3 extension regions and the county extension offices?
No.
Okay, so
And really, I've asked everyone, tell me how your job or your life has changed since July 1st. No one can tell me how it's changed. There have been no changes, and there will be no changes as a result of this. Now, I can't say nothing will ever change in the future. I think that'd be horrible to make that statement, actually, because there may be a need for some change down the road. But changing extension regions, going from 3 to 2 or 3 to 7, there's no relationship between our work with the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, and in the way the extension offices are organized. So
I was just in Sullivan County 2 weeks ago, and I'll just repeat what I said when I was there, that for extension offices, it's all additive. There's nothing negative that can happen to them. The positives will be if we can bring some additional resources. If we could get a grant to be able to support Christy Gordon's program on trying to reduce divorce, trying to get more of our nutrition department out working with FCS agents, trying to get more resources to support them. My personal passion is to help support extension to be bigger and greater than it's ever been before. And so we'll be fighting to make it better, fighting to get more resources to make it better. And just a side note, I met with the first 2 times I met with our new governor, the very first thing he said was, we've got to get more resources to support extension and have extension do more in our state. And then we're all in. And so I think not only do we have a passion for helping support extension, I think we've got a government at the state level that's willing to do that as well. So I'm excited about what the future of extension is going to be.
thanks, Megan.
Okay, the next 4 questions are from the UTIA retirees listening session, which is going on in West Knoxville at the moment. First question, why UTIA and not include the Space Institute and the Health Science Center in this new structure if it will help our rankings?
Well, so the Space Institute is already a part of UTK. The Health Science Center, something we could consider, but the fact is, they're 430 miles away. They have a different accrediting body. They have a different provost. It's a significantly different situation than we have with UTIA. UTIA, we have the same faculty senate, same faculty handbook, same provost on the same physical campus with the same accrediting body. So,
next question, overhead for UTK is a higher percentage taken as opposed to the UTIA grant process. Will UTIA grant overhead dollars be diminished and or cannibalized?
So I'll take a stab at that. First of all, F&A rates, overhead rates, are determined as an audit of our actual expenditures with regard to support for extramural funding. So we don't just arbitrarily set those rates. They're determined through an audit of what we've spent, and then the rates are set as a basis of that, and it's got to be auditable, because what we're saying is there's overhead, there's a cost associated with doing these projects, and we have to prove what that cost is. We can't just make it up. Then secondly, those audits are based upon cost centers, responsible cost centers, and we have separate cost centers for extension, for Ag Experiment Station, and for the College of Veterinary Medicine that are independently audited. And so there's no basis for saying, okay, now we're all one, we're going to roll all those together, because they'd still be separate cost centers. The audit is still going to determine what those overhead rates should be without any change. So that's anything to add, Dondi?
Okay.
Nobody from finance in here, so I should be okay on that.
Next question. How will UTIA maintain its identity in the future? For example, will the Department of Plant Sciences remain as such?
Well, again, I think there are no plans to change any departmental organizational structures. If we hear from plant science faculty and biology and other units that, boy, it'd really be better if we were put together, I think that'd be the basis for saying maybe there's something to look at here. But there are no plans to organize any units at this time.
And final question. UTIA has a strategic plan. One of the goals of this plan is to take UTIA back to the staffing levels we had prior to the recession a decade ago. Resources are limited, and if there are not resources to meet the basic land grant mission, how can current programs be expanded and new programs be added?
So it's all of our jobs, but partially my job to go ask for more funds. And Robert Burns has given me, that was public, I think, a wish list of about $6.6 million that we're going to pitch to that governor that I mentioned was supposedly very supportive of us. So we're giving an opportunity to say yes. Actually, next Tuesday at 2 o'clock, I'm meeting with all the Ag Caucus in the legislature to give them the pitch on just exactly that, to get more funds for extension along with some other things. And then immediately go right after that to the commissioner of F&A, Stuart McWhorter, make the same pitch to him. So we got to go sell. We got to go make some requests, but I personally like our chances. I think we've got a great argument. We've got a supportive governor, and fortunately, we're in a budget surplus. Right now, we're about $480 million above budget right now at the state level. Challenge is everybody else in the state is looking at that same money. So I'm sure they've got $5 billion worth of requests for the $500 million that they've got in surplus. But I like our chances. I think we got a great argument. We got to go make our case.
That concludes our online questions.
John Steyer, Herbert College of Agriculture. Very much appreciate the chance to have this interaction with you. We're thinking about enhancing our research productivity. We're thinking about making a better state for our Tennesseans. And we're hearing things about distrust. Joe DiPietro made that comment as he left, that his wish for us moving forward was that we could have better trust between faculty and administration. And as we know, administrators come and go. Faculty stay. And when we think about, we don't have to go too quickly, Randy. When we think about people engaging, who do we want to hire here? We want to hire people who are going to be engaged. We want faculty who want to be here, not just because it's a job, because, man, this is the University of Tennessee. When we look at a place like University of Wisconsin-Madison, top 5 research for 20 plus years running, it was due in large part, I think, to shared governance, to an adherence to shared governance. That means different things to different people. John Tyner said one version of it. We also have at the undergraduate level coming up from UTK this year, a Mattering and Belonging campaign. And I just wonder if this is not an opportunity, perhaps, with new leadership here, using the unification as a jumping off point to help anneal and improve and get to a better state between the faculty senate and administration. Administrators need to lead. Faculty need to be able to provide good ideas, and we need to be able to work on these together. And I just wonder if that's an opportunity for us.
I'll maybe add, but I'll defer to our chancellor, but I'll just add that I think you're exactly right. I think it's a great opportunity. By the way, we did look at Wisconsin. They also have like about $700 million worth of research because of their health science center. So the medical is a big part of where they're at. They've been getting a lot of grants because we've been looking at them and how do we catch those guys? And that's a missing part that they have that we don't. But I think that something I'm trying to do, maybe I'm not doing as good a job as I should, but I'm trying to do is have the higher level of transparency in my company that I've had for the last 30 years. One of our goals is to have all of our associates empowered. Just a little quick anecdote, but we're a privately held company with 900 employees in 6 countries around the world. We don't have to share financial information, but every month at the end of the month, we put our complete financial statements out to every single one of our employees. I've had a firm belief that the corollary to empowerment is information. If you want to have an empowered associates, they have to have information. We created on my third day on the job, Transparent UT. We've been putting everything that we can think of on the web. Our culture now with the administration is, why won't we put this out? So it's not what should we put out, but everything should be put out. It has to have a really strong reason. Maybe there's a personnel issue or a legal issue that you don't post. So again, I want more engagement. The thing that I'm going to try to commit to is try to be as transparent as we can to help you have the information you need to make those kind of decisions.
I totally agree with what you just said, and that I think that anytime, I've said this to the cabinet that I'm working with and other faculty members, that anytime there's been, in my own life, anytime there's been a disappointment or a loss or a misunderstanding, a conflict, that's always the time that relationships can become stronger. And in my own experience, they have. Not everybody, oftentimes you wish you could go back to how it was before. But when we sit down at the table and try to figure it out and say, what about this? So what can we do going forward? I really think what you said is absolutely right. And I would invite, I don't know everyone's name, and I'm sorry, you and Tim and I, when we get finished with these listening sessions, let's sit down. And the rest of our leaders, and let's put it out there, and not in a rehashing sense, but in a let's going forward sense. We've had some great experiences just in the last week. We had an academic retreat 2 days ago where the deans of this institute were all there. I had people tell me last night, actually they told my husband, he didn't even know what they were talking about actually. But he said, we had this session on Wednesday or whenever it was, that was the best one day I have spent since I've been at the university. There were 2 department heads that said, I came back to my office and said, what can I do? And usually at the end of those days, I'm like, I'm so tired, and thank God it's over. And that was an independent assessment. I had a great meeting yesterday with Gary and Misty on how we're going to work together with the Faculty Senate, our cabinet. Tim and I and the rest of our colleagues spent 7 hours last week on one day talking about how we as a team want to work together, how we're going to share information, how we're going to have each other's backs, how we're going to respect each other. It was 8 people spent a day. I was including Philip Fulmer and Tim Cross, who have a lot of other responsibilities. And I was really, really grateful for that. So I'm feeling so optimistic and so hopeful. And yes, we will take this experience and use it to make us stronger. That's the only thing I know how to do when things happen that don't go exactly as we would have liked. So thank you.
I'm Willie Hart, and I'm in Biosystems Engineering and Soil Science, and I'm not very good stand impromptu speaker, but I just have a couple comments, and then I've got to go to class. Mr. Boyd, I listened at the beginning, and you give the background of all the, and I'm not going to rehash what Dr. Tyner said, but it does make full circle. You went into the various constituents and talked to them, but you didn't share anything with the faculty. Here at the end, you proudly use the word of how transparent your company, you and your company are. But you're very, very actively secretive in this entire process. And yet, the bottom line, I keep hearing the question, we got to move forward. But this is where I grew up with, okay? Actions speak much louder than any word I will hear today. I grew up in a family that was honest, and actions meant everything. So what you do says volumes versus what you say. So where I am at this point, and from the point that it was announced on a Friday, meetings scrambled together, quote, in a phone question answer on a Tuesday, voted on Board of Trustees on a Friday. Personally, I have zero trust in administration, and I do not believe a whole lot as we move forward. So I hope your actions are stronger than your words. I've got to go to class.
Thank you. Just to respond and say what I said earlier, I believe that the decision of deciding what the title and the reporting responsibility of my direct reports are is something that I do. And it's a decision that I make. You can disagree with that, but it's not a question of trust. It's just a question of what you do, what you believe is the correct protocol in deciding your direct reports. At my company, if I change a vice president to an associate vice president, or let a vice president go, or hire a new vice president, I don't post that in advance on the website, and we don't ask all 900 employees for 6 months what they think.
More question from the UTIA retirees. Interim President Boyd's comments to John Steyer's question, including the Health Science Center to help our rankings, was contradictory to a previous answer. The comment in question is in reference to the University of Wisconsin Medical Schools. Would he like to reply?
So I think I understand the question. The question is, we said we weren't going to do Health Science Center at this time, and yet UW-Madison has been successful because they have a Health Science Center.
Yeah, so there are schools that have, it's a fact, there are schools that have a Health Science Center. It does help them with the rankings. So those aren't contradictory. Those two true statements. Health Science Centers do help you in your rankings. Our Health Science Center happens to be 430 miles away with a completely different system. So for us, it would be very, very challenging to do that. I think.
So full disclosure, I think unification will bring positive things to the Institute. But I would like to make a suggestion. I think the mistrust started when the faculty lost their representative on the Board of Trustees. And I know this is by statute, and the university would have to lobby to have that reinstated, but I think it would go a ways in helping to rebuild that trust.
So thank you for that. Maybe I'll address that a little bit, because I know the Tennessee Higher Education Commission has talked about it, and I've talked about it with our board. I'm not going to propose what the state government's going to do or not do, but one thing that I did look at, I'm not going to get my numbers right, but I think it was like the last 5 years have been over 300 something different decisions that the Board of Trustees voted on, and they were all 100% unanimous. So the actual voting at the Board of Trustees, same thing is true for the students. The actual voting is not that terribly significant. The most important part is having a voice, and both our faculty and our students have a voice on the Board of Trustees. And I do know with this particular board, they look to our faculty representative and to our students oftentimes and ask for your opinions. So I'm not commenting on what the legislature may or may not do, but the voice of the faculty and the voice of the students are there, and they're heard. And I think that's probably the more important thing than the actual vote.
I'd like to take any other questions. I'm sorry, but I had a commitment before this meeting was set at 11:30 back over on campus. So is there anything else that could be that you want to direct towards me? Okay. Are we okay if I dip out of here? All right. Thank you. Thank you all for being here. And I would like to say that the first actions speak louder than words. One action is showing up here. Okay. So we heard a lot, and we're going to get to work. And so I think that was a good action, and that's one you can count on. So thank you very much for everything that everyone does in this room.
Thank you, Donnie. And mindful that we
have time for one more question, if there's one more question in the room.
Hi, Al Womack. Randy, you gave the example of the professor that noted that the ranking would affect that recruitment of the student. That's excellent to hear such an example. What would go further is to have a clear articulation made public as to the distinct advantages of this pursuit of top 25. In other words, are there certain programs, are there certain departments that have advantages then to new fiscal resources in terms of grants and so forth? Something that is a little more, for lack of better words, touchy-feely than just the pursuit of top 25.
I agree with you 100%. I don't know that, never really felt that the pursuit of the top 25 just by itself was that terribly inspiring. It needs to have a greater calling. As we talk about the grand challenges, but why are we here? What difference are we going to make in the lives of Tennesseans? And so I'm hopeful that we'll create a vision like that. Dondi mentioned it, but she's at the beginning stages of articulating a plan to start having a visioning and strategy for all the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. And it's in Knoxville, your strategy and vision will be different than the health science centers. So it's something that you will need to develop. And hopefully we'll make sure those voices are heard that talk about having something that's inspiring and aspiring and not just a number. I agree with you 100%. Maybe I'll also make a comment and then you can close this, but I'll just simply say thank you for showing up. You know, I hear the questions about trust. You guys, some of you have or everybody has my email. It's randy@tennessee.edu. You can reach out anytime. I'll sit down with any of you anytime. As the gentleman that walked out said, you know, actions are greater than words. I can tell you about how optimistic I am about how much we're going to be able to do together and all the great things that are going to happen. But now we're going to go do them. So Donnie and Tim have also talked about this. We got to go put points on the board. We got to find ways in which we can get more resources for extension to be able to do some of these programs that we talked about. Finding ways to support the students here on this campus with new physical facilities and help our faculty with eliminating some of the bureaucracy and things that have been holding you back. But we just got to put points on the board, and that's what we're determined to do over these next few years. Thank you for being here.
Good. Just a couple of thoughts to wrap up. And I also want to thank you for coming. You could have been other places doing other things. Appreciate your commitment to the Institute, to the university as a whole. I just lost my train of thought. Well, I never thought I'd hear an engineer say touchy-feely, so thank you. Thank you, Dr. Womack, for that. And as I prepared for this today, I did not anticipate broken squirrel legs being part of our conversation either. But, you know, that just speaks to the depth, the breadth of the interest and the passion and the commitment that our folks have. And I'm saying our folks, broadly speaking, not just in the Institute, but UT Knoxville as well. And it's hard to refer to that these days, the combined Institute of Agriculture and UT Knoxville campus. I think that I've been going through maybe, and probably you have too, something like Dondi alluded to, and that is almost the stages of grief. You know, it feels like, no offense, President, but it feels like there's been a loss. First thing is anger, then denial, and then, you know, you got to kind of work through some of that. I don't know about you. I'm just talking about myself. But honestly, I've been there a little bit. And that's not, again, to express distrust or dissatisfaction. It's just sort of a personal experience. And I'm sure you've had your own experience through this as well. I do hope that we can continue to do the jobs that we're hired to do, that we're paid to do, and do them well, whether it's working with students, whether it's doing research, whether it's working with families and youth across the state, whether it's treating broken squirrel legs or other animal clients. You know, we really have the reputation that we have because we've done so well in the past, and that's part of that honoring the past part, but we really got to make sure we continue that. I get great feedback all the time with regard to our research, our education, our extension programs, and certainly grateful clients from the College of Veterinary Medicine are regular communicators with my office. I think we want that to continue. There is no reason we would not want that to continue in the future. President Boyd's heard that across the state as well. We want you to be able to do your jobs, be successful, and be a place where others want to come in the future, whether they're students looking for a top 100 institution or faculty looking for a new career opportunity. So in that spirit, though, I think maybe I've not done as good a job as I could have in communication. I sent a note to deans, directors, and department heads earlier this week saying, you know, I'm a little slow here, but I think there may be some need for increased communication. If you have a group getting together and you think it would be helpful for me to be part of a conversation about unification, about the future of the Institute, about the future of the university, I'm willing and able. Well, I say I'm willing. I'm willing if my schedule permits, and able if Trish tells me it's okay to attend such meetings and visit with anybody, anytime I can, because I think communication is key. And again, I'm not sure I've done as good a job as I should have, but I'll do my very best to address that moving forward. So make sure each of you know that as well. You may know of a group that would benefit from a conversation. And I want to make a special point to thank our retirees that joined us this morning from, I believe, out at the Eastern Region office. The people that have retired from this place are committed to this place, and we never want to take that for granted. They're, along with our alumni and other stakeholders, a key member of our Institute family, and we appreciate them too. So with that, I think we'll wrap up sort of the formal program here. I've got nowhere to go for 30 minutes, so happy to talk to anybody, and I hope my door remains open. And I know Randy's offer to connect with him by email is genuine. Just be prepared to hear from him at 5 a.m., at 8 p.m., or anytime in between. So thank you for coming.
Thank you.